So welcome. I'm Gloria, and I'm the navigator for John's group when it launches. So today we have John Lasater with us, and we're going to chat a little bit about his art and his upcoming mentorship group with Mastrius. And for those who are not familiar with John, let me give a little bit of an intro. So John Lasater was born and raised in Houston, Texas. He's an award-winning artist who now lives, paints, and teaches in Siloam Springs, Arkansas. John has been the main figure on the plein air scene for quite a while, painting beautiful landscapes, and is considered by many to be one of the best in the genre in American outdoor painting. He has won many awards and best of shows in plein air events and salon shows. Albeit outdoor painting will likely always hold an important place in his process. John most recently has been creating more calculated and ambitious works in his studio on top of other studies in different genres, including still life and figurative works, which he's a master in. And if you'd like to check out his website, you can go to www.lasaterart.com, or you can go to the mastrius.com website and under John Lasater Mentorship. So now we'll hand it over to John so you can get started. Yeah, talk about a little bit about your background, how you got started with art. And
well, first, I feel like I should confess that none of that you said is true. I actually stole that off your website.
Oh, yeah, right.
So thanks. I mean, it was worded so perfectly. I just thought that should be my intro.
Yeah, thanks.
So how did I get my start? Was that the big question?
Yeah, sure. Like, just
All right. Well, I never saw this coming. I through high school, through regular school, I was not interested in painting at all. I mean, we would go to museums, and I don't recall ever going through the Houston Museum of Art thinking, wow, this is what I want to do with my life. I don't know, my dad, when I was really young, he did a picture of Ernie and Bert from Sesame Street for me, and he's an engineer. My dad's an engineer. I mean, he took out compasses and everything to try to get the ovals of those heads just right. So they almost look like straight out of the show, but he did it from an engineering standpoint. And I remember being kind of fascinated with that, thinking, wow, he did that. I could create things too. And it really, funny enough, kind of started coming out of me through the form of greeting cards. Like I just make greeting cards for people. And one particular time I made my mom really upset when she was trying to help me with a health issue, and I saw her crying, and she ran to her room crying. And I remember just being so like deeply wounded by that. Like, I could actually make my mom cry. Well, maybe I can also use my skill to help her, And so I went into the room and made a greeting card for her. I don't remember what it said, but I brought it to her, and she was really touched by it. And she taped it to her door, and probably thought that I was going to be a real stand-up child after that, but I'm not sure I got any better. I learned I can manipulate using greeting cards. So funny enough, my first creative job was in greeting cards. So my first long-term one, I should say. And so that was really where I got started thinking about design and creativity and ideas, concepts, and color, thinking about trends and patterns, and how to research, and how to like filter research through myself so that it comes out as something that is me, to some degree. Of course, it was all for commercial purposes, but it was so fast. I didn't have time to do a whole lot of thinking about the audience of that product. So all that was, and I also had to commission illustrations, and all of that just worked together in concert to kind of prepare me for becoming a painter, because eventually I started just with kind of smaller paintings. I did a workshop with a friend who taught us still life, and plein air landscape painting. And we did both those things over a period of 3 days. And they were little paintings. They were little rectangles, you know, which was something I was already used to with greeting cards. And it was, how do you divide that canvas in a way so that it's got sort of an asymmetry and yet a unity to it, or something, you know, something like that was going through my head when I first started painting. And I had so much still to learn about mixing the paint and contrast and how to draw better and all those things. But I was well on my way in terms of having a aesthetic that I was kind of somewhat aiming for. So that was really how I got going. And I was just immediately addicted to painting outdoors. I loved it. I just loved it. And so that was what I was drawn to eventually to really pursue, and started attending plein air events. And that just kept feeding the desire, kept feeding the interest in doing it full time, all the time. And so that did happen, starting back in 2009 is when I left my job. So that's a quick story of how I got to where I am. And there's been other things along the way, but yeah.
Yeah. So you like plein air. So have you always been an outdoorsy person, like, to begin with? Or
I guess so. I know I was just told, when people give me advice, you know, like somebody very experienced, like the friend that first taught me painting, and I had workshops with C.W. Mundy and Carolyn Anderson, and they both just swore that, you know, you've got to paint for life. So I take that advice to heart. And I can't say I've always enjoyed painting outdoors. It's very rigorous and sweaty, and sometimes painful. Sometimes you're lugging a lot of heavy gear, and yeah. So it's had its frustrations. But then when I'm here in the studio, I can only go so long in the studio before I'm like, I got to get back out, because that was where I really experienced just a broad variety of motifs to choose from. And I always love that aha moment of when you see something and recognize a simpler way of painting it, you know. So that kind of thing is just, wow, it's so beautiful. And I can't do that as well looking at photos. So
yeah.
no.
So it's just like in painting from life, like you just can see a lot more color, or like anything else that's kind of stand out. Like it's
Well, the little nuances of color, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The eye is an excellent tool, of course. And you know, the cameras are getting better, but you'll never have the experience of gnats biting on your legs or wind blowing in your hair or any of that stuff. So
Yeah,
you know, there's always gonna be that.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You're never gonna feel like this painting was really earned, you know, when you do it in the studio. So
Right. Yeah. Okay. I'll to try to get out there. Like it's it's not
yeah.
easy. Yeah.
You have a pretty short window of time that it's comfortable outside, right?
Yeah, it's not too bad actually. Yeah, we can still go out like in the fall and stuff. So yeah, it's not too short. And then there's always the diehard ones that go on in the winter, in the snow. Yeah, every day.
Yeah.
So.
I don't think there may be one or two snow paintings on my website, but yeah, I value honesty too much. And when it snows here, I don't want to be out there. You know, it's usually cloudy. It's not as attractive as some of those motifs that, you know, some of those great northern painters paint. And so it's just not, the fodder isn't really there for a great painting. I don't feel like I could fake it, try to make it amazing, but I don't know. It's just not in me yet. I need to live in a place like that, or travel to a place like that for a long extended period. So maybe someday.
Yeah, because it's just, you just have very short period of snow, right? So you don't feel like
Well, some years none. So yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. Okay. Good. So you can talk about your arts or influences, or
Yeah, so I thought today I could show a few of my paintings and just talk about what excites me about them, and maybe that would give you a window into maybe even some of the variety of appreciation that I have, because I appreciate a very broad variety, and I think that's important for students to know, because they don't want someone that has only one way of seeing things to be a long-term mentor. It's tough unless they really know that they want to go that direction. But I mean, early on, I didn't know exactly what kind of painter I was going to end up being. And I knew who I wanted to be, but then that changed over time as I learned some art history, and as I began to really look around and experience more and more painters. My aesthetic changed, and so in a way I kind of want to be more of a generalist, as a category suggests, and help people just kind of find themselves somewhat. And I feel like I have even an eye for what a person can, what they're naturally good at, and what they could potentially grow in, just so that they have all those tools in their toolbox. And when they go to paint, it all comes together. So, but anyway, yeah, we could look at some of my paintings. That sounds good.
Yeah.
All right. So this one, I'm not always a still life painter, but I keep some still life going in the studio all through the year. And so it's something that I almost just do to please myself. I don't really have an outlet for it. Occasionally I can sell them, but not very often. And so I think that's part of the reason a lot of people avoid still life, because they don't like still life. I hear that all the time from folks that come to my plein air, workshops. But again, I'm following the advice of somebody before me, somebody wise, somebody that's been through it all and has taught lots of people. And so Charles Hawthorne, the book Hawthorne on Painting, he says a successful painter is continually painting still life. So that's why I keep a practice going of painting still life. It's training ground for understanding form, how to arrange, how to think about this rectangular space of a canvas. So that's partly why I do it. I also I enjoy the variety and to be able to kind of make my own little world with my own little spaces like this. So this was one that Jason Sacron and I hurriedly arranged in my studio a couple of years ago. And it was over an old painting. So I keep, a lot of paintings that aren't that great sitting around, and we just take random objects. It doesn't have to have a story to it. It's more of a formal exercise to me. So I'm just trying to take a variety of color and shape and size and arrangement, and see if I can do something that has music to it without necessarily having to have a story to it. So to me, that's really fun,
How much time do you spend arranging your objects? Like I've talked to some artists, that someone would spend like hours, like I guess it depends on the project, or if it's just exercise, right?
Yeah. No, I spend some time for sure, not too much, because what I've noticed, it's a little bit like painting. If you get too focused on it being perfect, it loses something. And so it's more like I'm waiting for a satisfaction that's like, yes, I can work with this. That's the phrase in my head I'm looking for. Because some of these objects were moved somewhat from their actual location in my mind, through the filter of my mind and my hand, they were moved somewhat. So it's more like, I think what I'm satisfying is that division of canvas and proportions, naturalistic proportions, but also more of a spiral movement, which is all kind of part of the Fibonacci golden section study. but I like to have overlapping spirals too. So it can't be too obvious for me. Like I love it when it's complicated, you know. So in musical terms, it's something that's beyond just pop music and has like a sophistication or a complexity to it. And I enjoy that, not because that it matters at all to a consumer, you know, like the average person can't see that or know that or even experience that feeling so much as like other artists can. And so, you know, when you hear it from other artists, like I think they're my audience, to be honest, is I want to hear from other artists. Wow, that was really complicated and interesting the way you did that. And to me, then it's like, that's the fuel I need to keep painting. So not on every piece, obviously. But on this one, it was kind of an artist piece. And I had Jason, you know, sitting right next to me doing the same painting. So there was a little competition there. And there was also this desire for him to go, wow, that's like different than you've ever done, you know? And so that just brings up the idea that painting with other people and within a community is a great idea. So
how often do you do still life? Like,
well, there's always something going, but you know, it may be every third week or something that I finally get back to it.
Yeah, so
I keep a little still life section back in a kind of some window light behind me, and I'll pop over there sometimes if I can't figure out what else to do. So
yeah, so it's more like an exercise, a warm up, or like in between things. So it's never really like a project, like or is it?
Well, you mean like a series of painting?
Or like
Not really. Not really. I can construct series after several years sometimes, and I'll say, you know, I could find lots of still life that is maybe rooted in the subject of pottery or you know, vessels or something like that, and then I can call it a series. But I don't normally paint in series now, so there's no rhyme or reason necessarily. But I do go back to certain subjects. You know, I've done enough sunsets, I could call it a series, you know, based on sunset or something like that. So yeah, I called this one Gestalt Concerto, and Gestalt is a concept about design that is it's an important one to understand in terms of how to arrange objects so that they have this feeling of proximity, and you know, and then also like deciding where you split a can, you know, like there's a big split across that table right there, and how do I make that split not seem like a disassociation? Well, you do that by having a darker background. Let's say that bridges, you know, the darker background bridges between some of these objects. So things like that are really fun design kind of psychological tools that you can use. So I would love to teach on Gestalt with people. So
oh wow,
yeah. Okay, next painting. How about? Okay, so I am a landscape painter primarily. And I think it's because I love the idea of an open space, like something about an open space, you know, rather than a still life or a portrait. An open space invites you in, you know. A still life can kind of, you know, especially if it's got like a singular object, it's like it's presenting this confrontational object that says, here I am, you know, here's what the painting's about. But you know, when you do something like an open courtyard here, there's more of a mood of an invitation to contemplate or to enter. You know what I'm saying? So something in that is more me. Like I hate to tell people what to think. I would much rather present some truth and then just say, you can think whatever you want about it. So yeah, this is just an example maybe of like earlier in my career, I was really drawn to intimate spaces like this, probably because I grew up in a big city and grew up in the suburbia, and I wasn't used to vistas. Like that wasn't, you know, vistas weren't part of my life, except on vacation, you know, and then it was like, wow, they're so amazing, but it wasn't part of my normal life. And so I didn't have big sky growing up, right? And I didn't have big clouds. I wasn't observing these things in my youth. And so therefore it's somewhat missing. I love the wonderland of like a closed in space like this. I can imagine myself running back and through that open doorway and then discovering some nook or cranny that I can crawl into and, emerge out on the roof somehow. That kind of thing is more like ingrained. But I've had this experience. I don't want to rush too quickly into that, but I've kind of had the second half of my life, let's say, or the second 2/3 of my life have been in a rural setting. And so I have a big view from my house. I have to mow like 4 acres and
Wow.
it's a whole other way of living. And
Yeah, so
I've-
from a tight space to a wide open space, quite a contrast.
yeah. Yeah. And, I've always enjoyed vistas. They're beautiful, but it just, for some reason, I was really just drawn to doing these kind of paintings for a long time. And around 2012, which was 12 years into my painting career, I went to a plein air event in Colorado in Rocky Mountain National Park. And it beat me up. I'll just tell you that. Like I found these beautiful places to paint that I should have done justice to, but man, it was like, if I saw Purple Mountain, I didn't know how to make that go back in the atmosphere. And so Purple Mountain turned into, like the most intense purple you can imagine. And it just didn't work. There's a lot of gray in Colorado too. So yeah, it took a lot of effort, I would say, to learn how to paint atmosphere,
But I love this painting. Like I seriously love this painting. I picked it out, on a promo for you. So it's like, the intimate space and then the shadow and the light. I just like that enclosed space with the shadow, like, and it's just, and then
this kind of thing is somewhat easy to design because like you've got light making a certain shape and you got shadow making a certain shape. And so like I was able to divide it, into 2 major values basically. And then after that, I knew I had the stuff it took to, then it was just a lot of effort of the little things. But yeah, I love finding those kind of things, but that's really hard when you're out painting a vista, right? Like something about vistas just don't invite, real bold composition, unless it's just late light or you have dramatic clouds or something that makes that possible. So
yeah. So when you blocked in this painting, would you just like put in the design of the shadow and the light, like mainly first, or you just, block in certain different areas to start?
Yeah, that's a good question. I also subscribe to the Charles Hawthorne method of painting in terms of finding the purest color first. That's the easiest thing for me to do. So, once I have a design, that's not, obviously color isn't the very first thing I do necessarily. Sometimes it is, but so I'll figure out where the major divisions are and things like that help me get started. And so once I have kind of some of those things drawn out, I don't draw every little, part of a window, let's say, or I didn't draw any of these PVC piping going on the side of the building. All that was to come later. So it was just where's the major gestures going to be. And then it was probably, I probably started with a yellow orange right here, I would say. And then I figured out the next color, and then I figured out the color touching that, and maybe the color of this wall, and then maybe this wall here. And so it's a kind of an ever growing pattern of color choices that show me that I'm getting to the right set of values and the right set of colors that are going to really say what this painting says. And so, a lot of unfinished paintings still out here at that point, just a few lines and stuff, but
Mm.
You know, it's somewhat scientific and methodical. So sometimes I want to bust out of that, and you know, I have about 4 or 5 different kinds of starts that I'll do sometimes,
Mhm.
just because I'm bored.
Mhm.
But this one is the most effective, I would say, in terms of if you really want to capture that drama, that thing that's that color and value drama that's going on, the intensity of a color compared to the grayer colors around it, that kind of thing. Like, to really get that effect, it just takes a careful study of color. So
Mhm. Yeah, that's an interesting start of a painting. Because usually they just say from dark to light, and but this is more stitching
mhm,
from the center or
mhm.
center of interest or whatever out.
Yeah, that's right. So dark to light is obviously more of a kind of an old method, and I mean, it's still used today. And you want to, you know, the medium dictates that to some degree, the medium of oil. However, the Hawthorne method basically taught people just put the color you meant to put right onto the canvas, you know, and just do that in a pattern across the painting, and don't do a whole lot of layering. Like, just try to nail the right color the first time. And if you get it wrong, you just maybe either scrape it away or you thin it out somehow and then put the, you know, a better color on top of it. If you redesign, you might want to wipe out some of the paint. So that's more the way I paint, is seeing the world as flat, and find those colors as to what I think those colors are. And I've, just because I've trained myself to do that over and over and over, I'm just so much quicker at identifying the color and value and chroma of that color and all that. I can do that so much quicker. So
Yeah, so you would try to hit like a block of correct hue, like
mhm,
chroma and value, right?
mhm,
And
mhm.
put it there,
Yeah,
and then the
yeah.
next one.
And then you come back over it. Like, I
Mhm.
probably did the whole roof, you know, with this sort of a cool gray. But then I noticed my eyes opened a little more to the smaller things, and I was like, well, hey, look, there's some actual blue, you know, that's reflecting off the sky onto that roof. And so that gave me a chance to just do some finishing strokes that sort of added a little more intensity to that part of the roof. So you know, there's things that you find later, and they just add that much more, you know. So
Yeah, so that would be like the second or third pass, right?
mhm, mhm, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Mm. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it reminds me of
Thanks.
Weisling. Like he started his portraits with an eye, right? And and
Uh,
then he paints from the eye out. So it's just all relationships.
yeah,
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting.
he does a detailed eye, would you say, or just kind of the big colors in the eye
Yeah, relatively
detail?
finished. I mean, yeah, yeah.
Wow. I've tried that because I've seen people do it on Instagram, you know, and I thought,
Mhm.
oh, that's how you do it. And doesn't work for me. But that's
Yeah.
cool. That's cool. Somebody else can do that in terms of getting the drawing just right and the, you know, the detail just right from the start. Um, I can appreciate it, but I can't do it for some reason.
Yeah. We all have our
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. I just feel like if I don't get the overall set of colors right, uh, then you know, the detail's not even going to help it. That's, you know,
Mhm.
that's the philosophy I'm working underneath. So I
Mhm.
am working on basically just flat colors that kind of move out. And so the drawing is mainly in the big shapes, the big planes. And so,
Yeah.
and then the little stuff like this come later for me.
Great. Yeah.
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 All right. And then here I'm finally starting to get into, you know, observing atmospheric distance, the effects of that curtain of the sky coming down in layers, you know, going back into the distance is just such an interest to me. Um, you know, and the best way to conquer those fears is to face it. You know, I had a fear, I think, because I had had some failures with, you know, and I encounter students all the time that are afraid of painting portrait because they've failed. They've made it's too humorous. It doesn't look right, you know. But but you got to keep facing it, and so for me, the drawing of this wasn't difficult, but figuring out those just subtle changes in color going back into the distance, really seeing it first of all, but really mixing it in a way that works, all that is just complicated. And what better thing do we have to do but grow and get better at the things we can't do quite as well. So anyway.
So do you pre-mix colors?
I do not. No, because color is relationship. And until I see it on the canvas, I don't feel like I'm seeing the relationships, until I see it up there and I can really compare, on the subject. And then it starts to feel real. Like I feel like I'm really standing there, and early on in this painting, just like on the last one, I had basically this area painted out, nothing out here. And so it was still uncomfortable. I was like, is this going to fail? Is this going to succeed? It feels kind of real in this middle part, but how's it going to be when I get to this big rock face right here? And so there were things that I had not resolved that I was a little afraid of, but, because I've had some failures in the past. So those things still linger and you wonder how it's going to work out. But, the best way to work it out is just pick a real simple spot with a very important comparison, sky, the very most distant thing, then the next most distant thing, and then the next kind of middle ground. And then it's like, okay, once you get those steps, you're like, okay, maybe I could continue to base this painting on that set of values and colors. So
yeah. So you probably have different ways to start painting. So for this one, do you paint from back to front, like top to bottom? Like, is there an order, or is it like?
Well, right now I'm being pretty religious about the idea of working back to front. And that's because studying under Israel Hirschberg, he really pushed that idea that if you really want to study, and if you want to do something that isn't formulaic, something that's just really empirical, then first look at that sky. The sky needs to be an important part of the painting. So I wouldn't say that's the case with, let's say, the last painting that I showed, where it's an intimate space that doesn't have much sky. But if the sky is an important part of the painting, establish that first, because that sky is what causes the colors, the layers of colors coming towards you. The sky is what's coloring those layers to a big degree. That's why, when you're looking way back and you see a blue sky coming all the way down to the horizon, and then the mountains at the horizon are blue, that's why it's like that, because the sky is the particles through which you're looking. So it's just a good idea to do this first and this second, and then work your way towards the foreground for the purpose of studying. And until I have thousands of these atmospheric paintings under my belt, then it's always going to somewhat feel like a study to me, and I won't have any formulas, and hopefully never, because I enjoy the complication. To me, that's what, if you don't end up with places where you had to scrape back and say it better, then why are you painting? Like, that's so boring that you could already know how to do everything. Yeah,
we wouldn't be painting anymore if it's like.
Yeah, or maybe that's just a different kind of painter, and that's probably a better way of putting it, because it's a little easier to teach when you already have a formula. But I would much rather see, like, for instance, where there were trees here, I painted the shapes of trees at first, and later I was just like, that is just so fakey. Look at the photo again. Do you really see trees? No, I don't see trees. All I see is this pattern that's really random. Looks a little more like fire or something like that going on between the greens and the shadows. And so I decided to scrape at that spot and be more honest about what I was observing. And so I literally have not even one tree is painted, pretty much. It's a good idea to maybe have like one, that it's like, oh, okay, those are trees. As soon as you have that relationship set up, then you can just play. And I learned that from C.W. Mundy, who taught on that quite a bit, the power of a relationship. So that's, and now you can see that one tree kind of standing out a little more, that maybe is one of the only indicators, maybe this one too, that what I'm looking at is a group of trees. So, and the color, the color obviously plays a really big role.
So. Yeah. So for that one, would you put in the shadows first, because it's quite a bit darker, and then the main trees are like on a mid-tone, and then you play with that, or just everything?
I think what I did is I had one color for this group, and then one color for this group, and to show like that is because basically nature presents itself to us more as a silhouette than it does light and shadow. So really I just picked kind of a mid-tone for this, just some sort of mid-tone and a mid-tone for that. But this mid-tone had more cool colors in it, so that I could see those groups of trees kind of stepping back into the distance. So yeah. That's I think a better first step, and then it's break it into light and shadow if it really deserves it, if it's something that's really right there, close to you. And I really got that from looking at French classical painting, neoclassicism, I should say. Corot. They were very good about generalizing things in the foreground, and then really putting most of the and they did this intentionally. They'd make the middle ground the most detailed part of the painting. And so I think about that sometimes when I'm painting, and I try to accomplish that. It's a little easier if you have, like a man-made structure out here in the middle ground. But
right, to make it make sense. Well, not make sense, but because of the focus.
It gives you something to focus on, doesn't it? Yeah.
So I guess that would be a choice, right? Like whether to make the mid-ground more detailed rather than the foreground, right? Like it could be either way, right? It could go either way.
Oh yeah, I've seen many modern paintings where where a painter really focused on the foreground, but of course that doesn't look maybe quite right until the background really becomes obscure and abstract, let's say. So you have to do other things to compensate, but to really, like, the reason for that, and it's important to know the reason for that is because you're inviting the person to come back into the space, into the painting. And if this was really detailed with perfect little trees, the eye would just come here and stop, even though there's lots to admire out here. And I'd much rather the artist or the viewer to have the experience of feeling like that's a place they could travel back into, or fly back into in this instance. There's not much traveling in this landscape. So
right. Yeah, it's a beautiful painting. Yeah, I love this one.
Thank you. And then finally, I've dabbled in portrait, but like I said, kind of early on in my career, I could paint figures and still lifes. I could draw them, let's say, but when it came to painting them, I didn't have much of a language for the figure, and so like every time I painted a figure, a portrait, it looked kind of like the person. It kind of had the right colors, but I didn't really know why I was doing it, and it didn't tie in with art history at all. Like there was no knowledge of art history that was telling me things like you could get away with not painting the eye really detailed because, well, this painter from history didn't even bother with that, so there was none of those voices in my head giving me permission to be more nebulous about parts of the face or figure and shadow, or and how to compose it in a way that would fit right into art history, compose it in a way where the shadow is really the main thing, and then you've got a little bit of light on one part of the face that makes it worth painting, that kind of thing. So I just didn't have that early on, but so I I basically abandoned any of these more substantial genres like portrait and still life, and really focused on landscape, because landscape was just full of challenge as well, but a different kind of challenge, you know. So when I finally came back to portrait about 4 or 5 years ago, it turns out it was great timing, because then COVID hit and I got to just continue with the portrait figure focus. And so this is Jason Sacron, and he and I set one another up with something of a narrative, and basically painted one another. We would take turns, so about an hour painting, and then an hour sitting, and an hour painting, an hour sitting, and we did this one whole day. And I decided to pose him as a weary artist, is the way I put it. Actually, you know what? I think he had a knife at first. I was thinking
Oh no.
somebody who's like Dostoevsky. I was thinking of somebody that was feeling sorry for murdering someone, or something along those lines. We abandoned the knife at some point because it was just weird and creepy. And just showing him, he did actually fall asleep. Yeah. So, and at the time he had some health concerns that were starting to bubble up. So, I began to see that in this painting, and yeah, it became a real emotional experience. And when I finished it at home. I just saw this oval type of composition within it. So I cut the canvas. That took forever. I couldn't figure out how to do that. I had to watch some YouTube videos. And then and then where do you find an oval frame, you know? So yeah, I did some searching on that.
So you found one?
I did. Victorianframes.com.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess.
Have you heard of that?
No, but you know, that makes sense, you know, Victorian.
Yeah.
Like the oval. No, that's interesting. Yeah, I was gonna ask you, yeah, why the oval? So it's just that you felt that would make a better composition than a rectangular one?
Yeah, there were just things in the corners I wasn't sure what to do with. And that's the thing with portrait and figure. They have a singularity to them that, you know, the rounded corners actually direct the eye to just the subject, you know. And so I suppose that's why.
Yeah. Oh,
it's the only oval I've ever done. But I entered this was really cool. I entered it in the BP Portrait Awards in London, and it made it through 2 phases, which I didn't expect to get any attention for this piece. But because it meant something to me, I just felt like entering. And it made it to the top 100. And then they selected only 40 from that. So I didn't make it into that part, but probably because it's not that, you know, it's a pretty simple painting, and it's a pretty dark painting too. But maybe if I'd made it bigger and put more attention to little things. But I was really learning a lot about modulation with color in this phase of my painting, and was having fun just making shapes that showed those modulations between the brightest colors. So you might see the effect of the modulation on the shoulder here. Here's the brightest color on the shoulder. The next piece of that modulation is this color, and then the next one's this color, that color, and on and on. And so it was almost like, you know, it comes out looking like paint by number in a way. Which I hate, the thought that it could look like a paint by number. But yeah,
but I was
enjoying,
right?
It takes some pretty serious mixing, you know.
Yeah, I just love all the different grays. Like it's the modulations, like you said. It's very harmonious and beautiful.
Yeah. So so that's all I brought in terms of my paintings.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah, I love them. Do you have any like a preferred genre, or just you love everything, like still life, people, figurative, and landscape? equal, or
I just have a preference for painting. I guess that's the only thing I feel in answer to that question. I think that sounds like I'm over romanticizing it, but I'm not. That's really what I believe. There's a temptation to present yourself as something you're not. Do you ever hear that in the artist circles? They're like, well, just don't tell people that. You don't need to tell people that about yourself. They need to, people don't get it when you're a genre hopper like I am, or people don't like to hear that you don't like your painting that much, that kind of stuff. But I can't bring myself to say otherwise. I really feel like that consumers deserve to hear my real feelings on a painting. And if they don't like that about it, great. I don't want them to have my painting. Honestly. So, and then it's, what I love is the relationships in the art community where you can be completely honest, be yourself. And I can't become a different person when I'm around a collector. I just can't. I have to have a representative do that for me. And that's few and far between these days. But that's the reason artists have representatives,
Right. Yeah. I guess they always say, say galleries, they want like a body of work, a brand. So they would only prefer like a certain lane, right? Like for one artist. So would you say you would go to different galleries or, somehow go around that or?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great way of putting it. And it's good advice, what you just said. To have a still life gallery and have a landscape gallery, and actually that's a really great marketing tool. Well, not marketing, but a great analysis tool for you as the artist, like what's working, what's not. And it might even push you to add more of a surprise factor to the paintings you're making, so something that would really grab somebody walking by your piece. That's a tough science to understand. And there's a lot of ways in to that, but
so what do you think is the, not secret, but what would you say it's something that make a painting grab people's attention or pop or?
Yeah. Well, there's no one answer. That's the thing. But it's what I hear a lot is that focal point is the way to do that. So really have a focal point, something really strong. And often the same person that says that is pointing back to artists like Sargent, who was very good about lightest light, darkest dark being right next to each other in a focal point on the thirds. There is a formula you could try to follow, although Sargent didn't follow that formula every time. They would just say his best paintings do that. But I think there's all kinds of things. And focal point is a good, it's a good way, but some consumers, oh gosh, warmth is a good one. I'm just going to give away all the tricks because I don't even follow the tricks most of the time, but it's obvious to me that a sunset is going to win the award. It's going to be the one that gets sold first. So let's just say the truth, Yeah. Something being just hyper drawn, So these are all things that I try to avoid most of the time, a repetition of the same formula. But things that are hyper drawn are going to have an instant appeal to people that don't have a real broad appreciation of art necessarily. So I'm not saying that hyperrealism doesn't have a place, because I actually like hyperrealism. I just don't like when it's maximized with no purpose, I guess. But yeah.
I guess it would be interested to incorporate it in, like just a hyper realist area or something like that.
When it comes to figurative, when we were doing greeting cards, when I was in the greeting card business, you couldn't just take like a photo of a person staring straight into the camera and put it on the front of a sympathy card or an anniversary card. That wouldn't work because people are like, well, that's not my wife or that's not my husband. I'm not going to buy this card because they're staring right at me. So what do you need? You need somebody that's actually looking away, or you need their head turned so that you only see, a part of the face or something like that. And then a person can imagine themselves as the subject, or they can imagine the subject as their granddaughter, or, that kind of thing. So there's tricks like that as well when it comes to figurative painting, and goes on and on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. So maybe we should talk a little bit about what you have planned for your mentorship group, like how you would teach in the mentorship group, perhaps.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, I will say this, that historical painting means a lot to me. And that's a fairly new thing in my overall 23-year career. Back in 2016, I went to study with Israel Hirschberg in Italy. And then I went back the following summer as well, to teach, but also to learn under him. And he really confronted me on the fact that I didn't know any of the Italian masters. I didn't know anything about fresco and mosaic from the Roman period. He was very adamant about that I really don't deserve to be a teacher unless I know these things. So 2016, that doesn't seem that long ago. It was 7 years ago. And I came back with a fire, because I was visiting museums and I didn't know what I was looking at. Like I didn't know Titian from Tintoretto, or I didn't know. All I knew was American art, I guess. I knew a few American artists, and that's okay. That we have a tradition here in America that's very based in American painting, but I didn't even know about how Europe influenced the American painters, that kind of thing, or how Japan influenced the American painters and the European painters. And so there was a lot to learn about the tradition of Western art. So I came back and bought lots of books and just read. I read words.
Words.
I read words.
Not pictures.
I read words, looked at pictures, and I began to really start to identify the artists that, through their stories, and through seeing more than their normal 2 or 3 paintings that everyone knows. I started to see the paintings that maybe they would have considered their best paintings, and I was learning so much about their methods, their hangups. I got a lot about the frustration of being an artist. It's never been better. I mean, we literally have the best environment now for being an artist. It was actually more frustrating in mid 19th century France, when all of the great art was being made. It was more frustrating to be an artist in that time, to try to make money and to try to live, and to try to find which camp you fit into. I mean, there was a battleground going on in the mid 19th century, because the market was really saturated and there was a lot of money in Europe. So, we're kind of facing the same thing here in America now. Everyone wants to learn, which is great, because it's great for us teachers. I love teaching. And so I've found myself kind of peeling away from the commercial side of painting to more the teaching side of painting. And I really enjoy it. I will do my best to steer people to just focus on becoming a better painter. I'm never going to talk about how important Facebook is to you becoming a successful artist, or any of that stuff. And so if there's a part of you that already feels a distaste towards that kind of talk, then you're my kind of person, because let's just become great painters. I've seen some painters emerge on the scene that had no publicity up until the point they emerged, and they're instantly admired, and then they just receive a following that happens so quick. And it's just because they didn't try to promote themselves too much before it was time, and I feel like I was guilty of that because I really enjoyed social media and I enjoyed showing off what I was working on. And I didn't mind people seeing my failures as well as my successes. And so I really invested a lot into that time-wise. But I don't know, it's actually kind of a beautiful thing when this just incredible painter, sometimes they're older in age too, that just emerge on the scene, and it's like, wow, okay, so just focus on becoming a better painter, like keep working on it, work on the hard skills, and get in an art community where you can really be fed like this one, I mean, get into mentorship situations, which I didn't really have a lot of early for me. But I definitely encourage what we're doing now. This is wonderful. I just love that Mastrius has created this forum. So a lot of my teaching is going to be out of those experiences of mine, and great quotes that I've found, and great quotes that guide me, along my journey. For instance, like Robert Henry said, he said, "Painting is a great mystery. No one has ever learned quite how to see. No one has ever quite learned how, to paint." And I love that. I think that actually shows, yeah, there's frontiers still. You can become a copy of another artist. You can do that, but just know that there's always frontier out there, especially in looking, like really looking, in late 19th century painting, they only went so far with looking. Like impressionists, they were the ones out there doing it on location, painting landscapes. They were also painting figures and still life, but they got into kind of a method of painting. And then the post-impressionists took it, and they were looking, but they were looking more internally as well. So there was more of an imagination kind of mixing into observation at that point. Both great things, imagination, observation. And then, as you know, like it kind of descended into Cubism, and then the other isms of the 20th century, which were all just sort of it was dissecting and pulling apart the rules of painting. And so observation basically fell away to some degree. And there was much more importance around imagination. Imagination is wonderful, and I am absolutely for that. It's an imaginative painting is something like it's something like music without words, So you could think of almost like an orchestra playing as a form of, an imaginative type of painting that has its basis in nature, because, in an orchestral piece, a symphony that has no grounding in musical history or in musical structure is not going to be interesting to your ears. But one that's grounded in nature and your and in music history is going to be really interesting to your ears. So it's kind of the same with painting. I think that there's probably more to explore in terms of imagination, but if you compare that with a really naturalistic eye, you've been out there, you've seen the way a tree, the form in a tree works, or if you really observe skin, and if you've really observed figures and how they're all interconnected, the parts of a body are all interconnected, there's a unity to them, those kind of things can really cause a musicality in the way you paint, and no matter what the subject is. So there's just going to be a lot of talk about that, and about the importance of nature and learning. And
Yeah.
and then I think critiquing is important, and that's obviously, I think that's really the best teaching tool, is to have your work critiqued or to watch somebody else's work be critiqued. Either way, you're like you're really gaining a lot, personally. So I definitely want to do that. Maybe demonstrate some exercises, and then just open discussion about personal development, and you know,
Mhm.
we can get into business questions, but when I talk about personal development, I'm talking about, you know, philosophical longevity for you as an artist, something that's going to make it where you can paint for 20 more years and enjoy every moment of it and grow, you know, that kind of thing. I think that kind of personal development is primary.
So philosophical longevity. So can you give a little bit of an example of it? Like how to achieve that? Well, of course, you know,
Mhm.
in nutshell, of course, not really.
Well, no, that's okay. Yeah, you are channeling in some degree, to some degree, because many of us get into painting because, wow, it's fun and it's a quick way to make money. Okay, those are very kind of low level reasons for doing it, and that seems to be generally what happens. I remember feeling that way. So yeah, no, it's more. I won some competitions like 8 to 10 years into my career, and nothing came of it. I got a few pats on the back, but then I went home and I had to keep working. I mean, I had to keep making paintings, and galleries didn't approach me. The pats on the back, you know, discontinued. And how do you, you got to kind of know what you're aiming for. And so I actually came to a point around 2014, I would say, where I had won enough things that I had fulfilled everything and sold enough things that I had fulfilled everything I thought I wanted out of painting. And it was a death. Like I achieved a death in my life, and it was very strange. I
Mhm.
was standing with a friend, and I just said, it just hit me right now that I've accomplished everything I wanted to with painting. My goals were too small, you know?
Mm.
And um, I have found that the people I mentor, that I've been telling them these things, I see the potential in them, you know, and I can see potential in literally everyone. I literally can see that in a certain genre, perhaps, or in a certain way of painting that's different than me. So I can see that, but I can see that potential because they fit in with art history somewhere, you know. There's a lot of people that will never go beyond maybe the drawing skills of a post-impressionist or something like that, but a love of paint and a love of color or a love of design is all they need to make it satisfying and beautiful. So, you know, that's what I mean. That's just one example, but
Mhm.
I want them to see that potential, that they just need to find the right family to fit into. And um and in order to, yeah, in order to still have something beyond these small goals, you know, how do you do that? So um I think telling people that they have that potential actually gives them a longer vision. You know, they can see farther down the road. uh and so I definitely try to mentor from that standpoint. um
Mhm. Yeah.
yeah.
So, so may I ask you what's your bigger goal? Like, or did you already mentioned it? Sorry.
Oh yeah, my okay, so when I had that death moment,
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
um I I came home from that still in the same, it was a, oh my gosh, it was a physiological feeling. Like I'm not exaggerating. I'm not a dramatic person. I felt dead, literally. Like there's nothing else I want to do. I had a family, you know. I probably could have held the family a little higher in respect, but um yeah, just career wise, I had achieved all I wanted to. So I knew then that I needed to look further into the future and just decide, okay, well, then what do you want to do with that? And I think just helping people find their way um, towards fitting into that stream of art that's been going on for millennia, you know, um, figuring out where they fit in, you know,
Mm.
and that to me, like I wrote that down, that teaching was something that maybe I could learn to love more. And maybe I could aim to grow in excellence. Uh, I'd grown enough to win some regional awards or some plein air events, but there are levels far beyond that. Which is weird, because when you go to these events, they say the best artists in America are here, and they try to promote it that way, which always felt kind of funny to me. But I just think there's new levels that can be tapped into, and so why not? So I just resolved to aim for that, even though it wasn't like a strong goal at the time. It was something I said, well, at least I could aim for that. And this was all before I had ever gone to study with Israel Hirschberg. And so once I went to study with him, he suggested the self-taught degree in art history. So I came home and did that, and it turned me into just a vicious teacher. I was just like, I finally have a language for what I've experienced through painting. Now I have like a language for it that it just changed everything. Like I knew what to say when it came to critiquing, or I knew how to encourage someone towards a next step in their own personal career. And I knew I could look at my own work even and say what I think was missing. And and it's given me a language to even sit down and write out. I've been working on kind of more of a philosophical approach to painting. I've been working on a book. I don't know if it'll ever publish, but it's more like ordering my thoughts, I guess, is what I'm doing. And it's been really fun. I've just having better reasons for painting has been, it's really been great.
Yeah. So your book is what is it about again? Like,
well, I don't know. I mean, I'm just writing. Like I am trying to structure it. One of them is called a manifesto on my purpose for painting, or something like that. And there's a couple. There's a couple. I don't even remember what the other one is. But it seemed like it deserved a second book. I'm looking now because I think I can find them. One of them's called In Service to Painting, because there's this aspect to painting where it draws me and I have no choice but to do it. Do you relate with that? I think you do.
Like aspect of painting, you mean?
Like there's a calling to it. Like you can't live with yourself if you don't. Yeah, there you go. So I see that in terms of like painting as a ghost that's beckoning me, and I'm never able to grab it because it's transparent. It's a ghost, but it's pulling me in and I can't help it. So it's something along those lines. And it's a little more maybe of a poetic type of book, but
I guess. Yeah. It's like people say it's in their blood, right? Like, I mean, you can't really.
And Whistler, I read a whole history on James McNeill Whistler, and he said something along the lines of, the generation to generation, the gods, birth someone on the earth that wants to do this and is a beautiful soul that paints. And he was basically saying, because at the time, I think he was feeling threatened, like maybe painting was going to become passé. And Whistler, and you can feel that even today. You can look at like AI and say, well, that's just going to replace the interest in art. And, I think in every generation, that threat has been hanging out there, that the world was going to progress in so much they didn't care about painting anymore. So, it's nothing new. So I love that.
Yeah. I think things haven't changed. I mean, it's repeats itself, or that's our path. That's our, anyway. So
right on.
I think we can talk forever, but yes, we've passed the hour. So so really appreciate you coming by and giving us the information. And a group is scheduled to launch August 4th. So if anyone's interested, please sign up.
Mhm.
And we can have more discussions and learnings and everything else. So
And thank you, Gloria. I appreciate you. Great line of questions, and you're a delightful co-host. So I hope everyone gets to experience this incredible team going on right here.
yeah, I know. Oh, and did you paint that painting? I thought it's in the Louvre. Did you steal it?
Well, that was just to show that I appreciate historical art, and I was working on a copy of Mona Lisa. I haven't done the details. I'm not a detail guy. Like, I got her face, and I'm like, well, the hand. Do I really need to go and put the pattern of lace? You know, all those things. I don't know.
Yeah, it's more impressionistic line, right?
There you go. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a color. It's just a color.
Yeah, there's so many different areas to explore. Like, I mean, different segments of a painting.
Mhm.
Just so
Yeah,
we'll never get tired of it. We'll always be painting.
that's right. That's good. Let's make sure everyone else feels that way too.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much. Thanks again. So yeah, have a good rest of the day and we'll chat with you soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.